Welcome everyone to today's program, which is brought to you by Ambulatory Alliances. I am Robert Kurtz, moderator for the webinar. Today's program will begin with a roundtable discussion between our panelists. Then we will have a question and answer session following completion of the roundtable. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. Our panelists will attempt to answer as many of your questions as they can during the Q&A portion of the program. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to inform you that today's program is the second in a four-part series focusing on selling an ambulatory surgery center. Part 1 addressed how to determine whether to sell your ASC and when to sell. This part will discuss how to prepare for the sale. The remaining two parts will cover how to effectively market an ASC and how to negotiate the deal terms. You'll receive information on how to register for the remaining programs in the series. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. We have Blayne Rush, President of Ambulatory Alliances. He's an SEC-registered and FINRA-licensed investment banker. He specializes in ASC brokerage, ASC turnarounds, and increasing ASC valuations through physician recruitment and syndications, and access to the capital markets and capital structuring consulting for surgery, urgent care centers, and radiation oncology centers. We also have Curtis Bernstein, who is Managing Director for Sinaiko Healthcare Consulting. Mr. Bernstein specializes in providing valuation, transaction advisory, strategic and operational consulting services to clients. He has extensive experience working closely with hospital systems, physician groups, ambulatory surgery centers, and other healthcare providers. We will now begin the roundtable discussion. I'm going to ask Blayne to get us started on the first question, which is, what are the goals of the preparing to sell stage?
Thanks, Rob. When you think about selling your ambulatory surgery center, you as the surgeon owners want to have a few outcomes that you want to see. So you obviously have some outcomes that you want to see, and typically some of those outcomes are peak price in terms, as well as a corporate partner that will help grow your business, etc. But in order to put your business in the best position possible to reach those outcomes, you must work hard in preparing your surgery center for sale. That being said, I'll answer the question. The goals of the preparing to sell stage is to prepare your surgery center where it looks as appealing as possible to the potential buyers. Because again, you have to look at it from their vantage point versus yours. You already think that it's beautiful, but you got to create it in such a manner that it's going to look good to them. Just as you would put a new coat of paint on your house before selling it, you should make your company look as attractive as possible. It takes time, effort, money, foresight. Physician owners might find their ASC runs better with all of these value-enhancing factors in place, which makes their implementation a good idea for all parties, both buyers and sellers. Buyers and investors will find that prep work enables them to recognize the right acquisition fit when it comes across their desk. So making sure your surgery center is appealing as possible requires us to look at it in a multi-dimensional manner. Some of the goals are to increase the speed of the process, to make the process more efficient, to manage and increase the overall perception to the buyers, which directly affects the value because their perception is their reality, as they say. To learn as much about your business as you can, because you'll be surprised to know how much owners of surgery centers really know about their options of their business and their business in a deeper aspect. You want to properly position your business and articulate its investment merits. This process allows for the identification of potential buyer concerns on issues ranging from growth, sustainability, margin trends, and case or procedural concentrations, contingent liabilities, and any physician partner issues. You'll need to understand the assumptions that drive your financial model. This is very important as this forms the basis for the valuation that will be performed by the buyers or the investors, if you will. Therefore, you must, again, approach your financial projections from the buyer's perspective and gain comfort with the numbers, trends, and key assumptions that drive them. You need to understand the valuation methodologies that buyers will use in their analysis. They'll use the comparable companies, precedent transactions, discount cash flow analysis, and to a lesser extent, but sometimes the leverage buyout analysis, which is using debt. The more questions that you answer up front, the fewer you must answer during the process to get the buyers familiar with your ASC story. The longer your business is on the market, the easier it is to lose momentum because time kills deals. Speed does matter in this process, so you want to look at the efficiency. So the more information you provide to the buyer more quickly, they can determine their interest level in the opportunity, because no surgeon wants to waste their time educating potential buyers on the business only for the buyer to indicate that they're not interested. So the sooner you can help some of the buyers to screen themselves out, the better. So use this process to help you decide which buyers to spend time with and ignore the rest. On buyer perceptions, buyers are influenced by appearances. The better prepared you are, the better organized you are, the better you understand and convey your unique message, the better your surgery center will look in the eyes of the potential investors. The more authentic and knowledgeable you come across, the more believable your story will be and the more influence you'll have on the buyers. Surgeons too often want to speak about how much money the center has made them and how great it is, but buyers only care about past performance to the extent that it's prediction of future growth. If it's already as good as it gets, then unless the buyer wants to be buying it for cash flow or the downstream benefits such as a hospital wanting the alliances, buyers might not see the value to them. One of your goals is to get to know your center and market in your market so you convey to the potential buyers where the growth will be. You'll need to show the investors how far you've taken the center and then how they can help you take it well beyond that. Not doing all of this will increase the likelihood that the entire story and the potential of the center will not be known to the buyers, which in turn will equate to less interest and less money for when you sell. Again, I cannot stress it enough. Buyers are looking for future value from the purchase or the investment.
Thank you, Blayne. Curtis, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great answer, Blayne. I think covers a lot of the bases. Just to kind of summarize some of that stuff, which I think we'll continue and talk about throughout this presentation and discussion, is that the buyers want someone they can trust. And I think a lot of what Blayne was saying there is kind of building trust. You got to explain what's going on with your financials. You got to make sure your financials are clean, and we'll talk about doing that a little later. Your projections have to come based on your financials. If there's a huge disconnect between your historical performance and your future performance, you better have a clean story on why and how that's going to happen, or the buyer's not going to trust you. And the longer the process draws out, the more difficult it is to close the deal. So I think Blayne's answer was great, and it covers really everything.
Yeah. Terrific. We'll have to a terrific start, Blayne. I'm going to come back to you to start a discussion on the next question. How should an ASC define its wants, needs, and desires?
Whenever you start the prepare to sell process, or actually even a little bit before, you need to understand the physician owners and the ambulatory surgery center's company, so the business, ASC businesses, wants, needs, and desires. This will help you in a couple of ways. It'll help you get a handle on how you can tell your story, or in other words, sell your center, the strategic position of the surgery center in the marketplace, as well as understand what you need in a new partner. Additionally, what you want out of a transaction. So we can discuss some of the typical wants, needs, and desires, but this is very center and owner specific. What I would do is ask each partner, so each individual owner, shareholder, surgeon, what they want to see in a buyer and what they want out of a sale, because some will be similar, some will not be similar. You'll have some people way out in left field. This will help with getting a handle on the questions, but also help with physician buy-in, which we'll speak more about later. But as we've discussed in previous webinars, we'd want to take a look at this thought process in a more strategic fashion. What we would do if we were brought in early enough in the process is recommend doing a SWOT analysis, or we would do it ourselves just to get a better understanding if we were assistant in the process. And there are other, obviously, analysis that can get you there, but SWOT analysis is fairly easy, straightforward. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. It guides you to identify the positives and negatives inside your ambulatory surgery center business. That's the S and W. And the outside of it, the external environment, and that's the O and T. This will help you develop a full awareness of your situation, which can help with creating your understanding and answering those questions. You know, typically speaking, some of the strengths of surgery centers is young, engaged partners, which is very valuable to the buyers, multi-specialty case mix, well-paying long-term contracts. Some of the weaknesses, as you can see, low volume, high debt, disengaged partners, low-paying contracts, overbuilt center. Some of the opportunities, ability to take on more cases or expand, be able to improve the payer contracts, recruitable surgeons in the market or recruitable cases from existing surgeons, lowering expenses, improving business best practices, and establishing a direct-to-patient marketing program, which is kind of a buzz and a hot topic now. Threats, competing hospitals, in-office procedure rooms, competing ASCs, and fractured partnerships or disgruntled partners, if you will. And the major threat to success in the SWOT is the competition. So think of competition in as broad a form as you can. But we would look at the needs as in a buyer that could help shore up weaknesses and threats, as well as help execute and take advantages of opportunities. Because when you go through this process, you're trying to get to understand yourself, but you're also trying to get to understand what you guys need in a potential buyer or corporate partner, if you will. For example, in one surgery center, working with a hospital health system, working with the ASC, and this hospital health system potential buyer, corporate investor, whatever you want to call it, keeps trying to sell us on their ability to leverage their contracts, et cetera. Well, that's great in reality, but we need help with caseload recruiting in this particular surgery center. So we need more docs, more cases. Thus, unless they can prove that they can help us with caseload recruiting, they're not really a fit for us. That's not one of our needs. If you're a well-oiled machine, well-running, larger surgery center, more often than not, you just need a solid partner that can pay the most. At least that's what most of the surgeon doctors say.
Curtis?
That was that was a great answer. I really don't have much to add.
Sounds good. Move on to the next question. Blayne, again, I'm going to have you lead the discussion on this. How should a physician go about getting buy-in from partners?
This is a very important step in the process. I've seen many deals that if this wasn't done up front and openly and communicated over and over again, deals blow up because of this. Again, and really it comes down to trust, like Curtis and I were speaking in the first question, not only from the external potential partner, but also your internal. But again, we spoke about this briefly in the first question, but I can't stress enough because, again, we've seen so many of these deals blow up in the 11th hour, or if you can allow me to use a football terminology, in the red zone, where they're about to punch it in, about to win the game, the deal breaks up. But one way is to over-communicate and to speak about the pros to selling your surgery center, which is a huge part of getting the physician buy-in. You know, some of the pros are converting future income in today's dollars, which has a very positive tax rate. Well, positive, it depends on how you look at it, but it's a lower tax rate. So you pay capital gains rates today rather than income rates over time. Take money off the table and diversify your investment so you can reduce your risk exposure and debt. no one has a crystal ball to see what the future holds, so all business ownership carries risk, even though sometimes physicians that I work with seem to believe that there is no risk to holding on to the surgery center. Better management, so you want to find a partner that's going to bring better management than what you have today. Better contracts, be it from third-party payers or some of your vendors, pricing, improve physician recruitment, improve efficiencies, maybe not have to have such a large administrative staff because those guys have that. And in some cases, you get your life back. And what I mean by that, in this situation, someone else is responsible for that phone call about the IT problems, about the personnel problems, replacing the nurse or office staff, etc. And you can concentrate on practicing medicine. Some of the cons, and these things need to be no different than your weaknesses in your surgery center. They need to be discussed with the potential buyers. The cons or the weaknesses, if you will, of selling your surgery center needs to be put on the table so everybody can have that dialogue and get the buy-in. But you're no longer the only decision maker. Now that you have a corporate partner, you have to pay management fees most of the time. And in some cases, even if you're not making a profit, you have to share the future performance of the center. You might have chosen the wrong partner, and they may not benefit you long term. That's possible, seen it. You need to speak with the partners and discuss, again, both the pros and the cons of selling your ambulatory surgery center. You need to keep them informed throughout the process in order to keep that buy-in once you get it. And it needs to be spoken about early on and often, because this can kill deals. Like I mentioned early on, buyers want partners that are serious about the transaction and can make decisions and know what they want and do not want. And again, do not wait until you're in the negotiation stage to educate and get the buy-ins from your physicians. Not only your physician partners, but even some of your physician utilizers that use it a good bit, because they start getting scared that things are going to change, or they start hearing rumors on the streets. And a lot of times people think when you're selling that something's wrong going on. I don't know why people have that impression a lot of times in the marketplace, but I hear that. I mean, some surgery centers are making a significant amount of money, and they want to take money off the table, and that's why they're selling. So it's all for positive reasons, but you got to get in front of the rumors, and you don't want them learning about this piecemeal through half-truth rumors, which leads to assumptions.
Excellent, thank you. Curtis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think early on in the phase, you really need to understand what all the partners' goals are as well. Some physicians may be interested in taking money off the table. Some may be interested in getting their life back. Some may have no interest at all. They're fine just doing, what they're doing, and might not care one way or the other. But I mean, you need to define that at the beginning so you understand what the deal is going to look like post-transaction as well. Some of the physicians may have an interest in still having a considerable amount of control or interest within the center. There's different management companies that will do different deals that will allow the physicians to have control, or some entities don't want that to happen. They want to have control. So like Blayne said, you might have the wrong management company. And then, as Blayne said, communication is key. Obviously, keeping the doctors informed as the whole process is going along. What is the management company or other physicians buying in? What are they bringing to the table? You might create a team of physicians to head up the transaction, because obviously if you have a strong multi-specialty center or any center with a significant number of physician owners and physicians involved in the center, you probably don't want all the physicians involved, because that would just drag on the process significantly and not get the deal done. So you're going to set up probably some kind of committee, have just a couple doctors involved, whatever it may be. But that committee needs to kind of continually needs to continually communicate back with the other partners and the other doctors involved on what's going on in the deal. When are people going to be visiting? What are they talking about? What are the benefits each of the partners are coming up with? Then probably once you define who you want to bring to the table and deal with, maybe it's a set of 1, 2, 3, however many management companies, bring those proposals back to the partners and make it more of a group decision at that point. And just keep communicating and trying to get people involved and making sure they're involved in the decision. Because even though you think they may be happy, I've had experiences at the end where people have been going along with the process, and then at the end they're just not happy, and it's a couple of positions, and that may just blow up the whole deal.
Thank you. Let's keep moving. How should an ASC put together a team of advisors for the sale? Who should be on that team? Blayne?
That's a good tie-in, because one of the team advisors would be a physician committee, if you will. I'll speak more about that in a second. But, physician owners of ambulatory surgery centers are obviously, at least the successful ambulatory surgery centers are obviously very intelligent and accomplished professionals. But in general, they'll only likely complete 1 or 2 sales transactions in the course of their lifetime. Yet those deals will be probably the largest and most significant financial sales transactions of their entire life. So by definition, the inexperience, meaning having no experience in this, essentially these novice surgery center sellers can prove financially catastrophic or financially very positive as they negotiate with a surgery center buyer's full-time professional M&A team. The buyers out there have significant experience buying these surgery centers, and that's what their team is paid to do over and over. Additionally, there's many implications such as legal and tax implications that you'll encounter, not to mention the negotiation strategies and the business implications that go on. So having the right advisors up front to help you structure the transaction, whereas to mitigate or lessen some of the issues that we spoke about or just mentioned is key. And you should have a team that consists of a transaction accountant, your business accountant, transaction lawyer, industry-specific investment bankers, key members of your management team. And if you're a larger group of surgeons, you want a transaction committee that is empowered by the groups of owners. And also, in a lot of times, you want a valuation expert on that team. But let's talk about whys behind some of these. So accountant and then a transaction accountant. Sometimes that could be the same person, but oftentimes not. It's important that you seek out an accountant with specific experience with business transfers. I do not believe that they have to have specific ASC transactional experience, but you need one that understands the different methods that you can transfer the business and the tax consequences of each. Your current accountant might know some, but do they know enough to make strategic recommendations? They might. Again, that's individual specific. Do they understand the tax consequences around the allocations of the sales price? Do they understand separating personal and business goodwill and the tax implications of that, which sometimes can be huge. While we as investment bankers understand tax implications and deal structures because of our experience in financial education and whatnot, we'll point you and your accountant in some directions, but we're not in a position to offer tax advice. While it is very possible that you have healthcare lawyers that you call on often, but you need to make sure that you have an attorney on your team that is very experienced with surgery center business transfers and the associated deal documents, and more importantly, they have the temperament to make sure that the deal does not stall because they want to argue and debate issues that are not very important or important to getting the deal done or have very little to no risk associated with them. You want to have a industry-specific investment banker, one that's going to be with you from the beginning to the end. And I stress that because there's some people out there that only take on part of the process. Speaking for what we do, we work with the physician owners from understanding the value drivers to making adjustments to their center's business, capturing internal cases, resyndication, define the market for the center, identifying the buyers within each market, and then crafting the message that puts your center and its growth, because again, that's a huge piece of this process, in the best light, and then marketing the center and negotiating the price and all the deal terms. You'll need someone from your senior operations team to be the point person within your center. This person will be the one that collects and provides the due diligence requests, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and there'll be someone that will interact with the deal team a lot. Again, like Curtis was mentioning before, if you have a large group of physician owners, it's imperative that you get their buy-in, as we discussed, but it's too time-consuming to get permission from each and every partner every step of the process. That's why, as he recommended and we recommend, you set up a small sales transaction committee. Obviously, if you have a small group, then in essence that would be your transaction committee. And third-party valuation professionals. If you're doing a complex adjustment, such as syndication prior to sale of a center, depending on the buyer and how the negotiations go, we could very well need a third-party valuation done in order to justify the price that is negotiated. We as investment bankers can do some of this and know our job is to maximize the sales price and are seen in that role. Thus, an independent third-party valuation professional, such as what Curtis does, is not typically seen in that manner, meaning they're seen as a neutral party, where someone that's on your team really is looked upon to maximize your value capture. And you can locate these outside professionals by reading articles that are published, doing search on the internet, asking other professionals for referrals, etc. You want to interview them and ask for some references.
Thank you. Curtis, anything to add?
Not much. Just quickly on the valuation part. I mean, it's not that common, I think, to get the valuation before the sale. But if you are going to get a valuation firm involved, I think it's important to get a widely recognized expert in the area of surgery center valuations. There's a lot of folks out there that do valuation, and one day they'll be doing a gas station, the next day they'll be doing an ASC. You don't want to get your specific CPA to do the work, because there's going to be some complications with independence. Obviously, they're working on your behalf, and then firms out there that are buying these centers generally have a list of approved valuators that they like to see do these valuations, because they know they have expertise in the area. And so you really want to get a firm like that when it comes down to the actual purchase, if you need that support, there's going to be something out there that the firm can trust. And there's a number of firms out there that do specialize in this area, and as Blayne said, you can generally find them by looking at articles and researching. So that's it for that one, Rob.
Thanks, Curtis. I'm going to stick with you to start discussion on the next question. How do you recast finances and clean up a balance sheet?
Sure. Well, I mean, historical income statements and balance sheets are what they are, but most people want to see those cleaned up a little. On the balance sheet, common stuff that we generally see are payables or liabilities between related parties. Some of the physicians lent some money in addition to equity, and questions, is it actually payable, or can that be converted to some form of equity as part of the deal, or how's that going to have to come out of the partner's pocket? Depending on the age of the surgery center and the size of the surgery center, of times on the fixed asset listing, there will be a number of assets that were purchased that may no longer be owned by the center or have been fully depreciated, that are sitting in some storage room, maybe in the basement of the surgery center, that are still sitting there on the list. And then you're going to spend all this time kind of reconciling and making sure everything's there and cleaning all that stuff up. A lot of times, the surgery centers, just because of the nature of their size and the desire not to get things too complicated, the balance sheet won't include receivables or inventory or anything like that. So, it makes sense to take those numbers from your billing system, clean up your balance sheet, make it more of an accrual base, which means that you're doing it based on, what you expect to collect versus cash, which is based on what you've already collected. So under an accrual basis, you'd have a receivable, you'd have some inventory, you'd probably have additional payables above and beyond your credit cards, which are generally on a cash-based balance sheet. So, converting things to accrual is always good because it gives you more of a true picture of exactly what's going on. Don't see a lot of centers actually doing that, but, it helps, I think, on the sale process because it actually tells the buyer what's happening. On the income statement side, you'll want to get rid of any of those non-recurring one-time discretionary expenses and make adjustments. And what you could do is you could start with your financial statement, your historical financial statement, and create these adjustments in a separate column and just footnote and explain, so the potential buyer will know what's going on, why you're making these adjustments. So clean them up at the front end. One of the biggest things that I always dislike seeing is when you have reports out of a billing system that don't tie anywhere near to your balance sheet or income statement. You're showing what kind of revenue you have, and your billing report might show $3 million, and your income statement shows $4 million. Well, why is your revenue $4 million on your income statement? Maybe you have some rents or some other stuff that makes up the difference. But I think at the front end, you just need to make sure you understand why there are those differences, and then you can explain them to someone. And if there are differences, then you got to if you can't explain, then you better dig in a little deeper because, at the end of the day, those will probably be adjusted out for projection purposes.
Blayne?
From my role, I take a little more aggressive approach to normalizing the financials because what I'm trying to do is maximize the value. So I would tell you to go through every line by line because physician owners, and small business owners for that matter, whenever they look at their financials, they're looking at it from the standpoint of minimizing their tax liability. In this situation, you really don't want to look at it as minimizing your tax liabilities. You want to look at it as in maximizing your profits, which are obviously polar opposites a lot of times. So you want to go out and create a pro forma the same thing that Curtis was talking about, and create this column over here with these footnotes, but you want to create a pro forma and recast the financials. You want to look at everything that is not recurring or that is something that in a normal business, meaning if it wasn't your personal business, that the cost wouldn't be so high, like your Learjet or your motorhome or your vacation that you use to bring the board, and it's a board retreat or whatever. I'm being funny to an extent, but you get the point. Donations, bad debt expenses, uninsured losses, marketing, trial, advertisement, one-time legal lawsuits, a donation, that's one time, etc. So you guys get the point, but you want to go line item by line item. If you got your spouse on salary there and you're paying them significantly more than you would necessarily have to pay someone to replace that role, those types of things you want to look at.
Terrific. Thank you. Curtis, I'm going to come back to you to start a discussion on the next question. What are the industry value drivers?
I think a lot of what Blayne covered in the SWOT analysis probably cover a lot of the value drivers, and then there's obviously more, but having those young aggressive physicians locked in through financial means or non-competes, and those things are a big driver. In certain states, there's a certificate of need requirement to develop a surgery center, creates a good barrier to entry for potential buyers. Definitely, more value drivers, revenue. Kind of going back on recasting finances, one thing you probably want to look at closely is your revenue and your contracts, your payer contracts, and see if there's, any way within the market to increase revenue. And, those surgery center management companies that are out there that own a number of centers within your market might have some of that leverage. That might be able to increase some of that third-party, non-governmental revenue through better contracts. The overall case mix is a factor. There's been more of a drive toward spine cases or orthopedic surgery cases, even though we're seeing a little bit push on the other side now of health systems starting to employ orthopedic surgeons. The capacity and ability to grow the center, as Blayne had mentioned kind of in the first slide, if a center is mature and they don't have capacity to grow, it's great that historically you've pulled out $1 million a year out of the center, but you're kind of stuck at that $1 million unless your growth in revenue, your reimbursement per case, is growing faster than your expense cost per case, which, in this environment, it's probably difficult to prove out. So unless you're going to grow with more cases, you're gonna be fixed at probably a lower multiple of EBITDA, and you're going to have less management companies or other potential strategic buyers interested in the sale because of that inability to grow.
Thank you. Blayne, do you have anything to
add? One thing, and he touched on this, but the physician's profile. One particular thing that we've run into more so lately, and I don't know if it's just the luck or whatnot, is the age of the physicians or the number of physicians that are in excess of 60 years old, because they look at, they being the buyers and the investors look at that as, nearing retirement age and worried about those guys in-house retiring on them after they cut them a big check. One thing that we've done with some of our clients is look at succession planning, bringing in younger physicians, and I think that's an argument that can be made to lessen the blow or lessen the that issue with the potential investors. So that's one big thing that we've addressed early on. And like you said before, because the buyers are often worried that they'll cut a big check to the physicians for the center, and as soon as the transaction is final, the surgeons in-house retire or spend more time on the golf course than in the operating room. So you need to evaluate this with the current surgeons and be prepared to overcome this. And again, this can be overcome with succession planning in place and strong non-competes in place for some of the younger physicians.
Thank you. Curtis?
Just real quick on that, Rob. Yeah, just real quick. I think I agree completely with Blayne. One thing we do see is where the physician's already doing succession planning and the younger physician might already be using the center but may not be tied in with non-competes and financials. And that's obviously one thing I think Blayne helps with, and that's the profile is getting those doctors locked in. And we talk about kind of cleaning up your center, doing this and making a good story. Well, getting those doctors locked in before trying to sell the center, I think, is important, because then it takes away some of that risk on the buyer.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And Curtis, going to stick with you to start our next discussion. What have you seen buyers typically do after they purchase an ASC to improve it? And is there anything an ASC can do? Can it do any of that prior to the sale to increase the value of the center?
Yeah, I mean, with the typical, we're going to assume this is a management company versus like a private equity buyer who just wants to give you some money and help grow the business. But the traditional management companies out there selling that they can help you negotiate better contracts, managed care contracts. They can help reduce some of your supply costs through a GPO, access to their GPO, measure quality metrics as we move more toward pay for value. And, these are all things an ASC could already do for themselves. Obviously, we talked about recasting your finances or how you clean up your center, but, before you go into a sale, and this is one thing I see is, people wait until the last minute to start doing these things and think that all of a sudden it's going to change something. I value a lot of physician practices and the surgeons out there on Saturday doing some extra cases because they think it's going to increase the value. Well, it's not going to increase the value because we already know what's being done historically, and there's a cutoff point. So doing these things at the last minute doesn't make sense. Get people involved early in the process. 6 months, a year, year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, before you want to sell, so that they can help clean up the center and improve upon it. Renegotiate those contracts, get those better rates. If your payers are looking to do something more unique, like go at risk on certain things, and maybe you do that, but you need to understand what that means, and you probably got to get ahead of the curve on it. So that way, when the buyers come in and say, oh, well, these people are going to this methodology, and when I look at what it means to your center, it's not a good thing. Well, you need to be prepared for that and understand and make it a good thing beforehand. Pay for value and looking at quality metrics through your EMR system. Make sure your EMR system's up to date. Make sure you're looking at these things that are going to affect your future reimbursement, so you can sell that, to a buyer. And then same with supply costs. The question is how involved are the doctors in the actual purchases? I've seen pretty weak administrators who just take whatever they're given, don't negotiate, don't try to influence physician preference on what they use, and they're using all the more expensive equipment and supplies, implants, whatever it may be. And the buyer's going to come in there and know that they're just not going to change physician preference. So if you start working that on beforehand and you show that the preference is changing and that's going to project into future additional cash flow to the buyer would be, very happy that that's already happening, and they don't have to do all the work to move that along.
Thank you. Blayne, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a couple of things. In general terms, the actions that the buyers of your surgery center would look at and possibly make is adjustments for improvements all related to the value drivers that we spoke about, but they'll look at ways to decrease costs, increase revenue, and increase efficiencies. Even in the most advantageous markets, many owners of ASCs leave substantial money on the table when they sell their surgery centers because, like Curtis was saying, they truly don't have a handle on what all these little things mean at the end of the day and how to maximize their multiplier, meaning their profits, because what they'll come in is give some multiple of profits. They'll do discount cash flows, but that's another topic. Or they don't understand, or they don't want to invest the required time and effort, but the buyers will, because will after they purchase your center. So you'll either get a multiple of these changes, or you'll get a percentage, meaning a small piece after of the changes if the buyers come in and do it. But some of the things that we look at is staffing levels and in cost, and suggest that people right-size that, because as the surgery centers, as we talked about in some of these other webinars, as they mature and get into the slower growth stage, people lose handle on some of the expenses because the money's flowing in, and they're not as conscious about that because they have plenty of money. And look at supply costs from A to Z. look at the physician's preferences and the materials and equipment and consumables that each person, each surgeon is using on each case, and see if you can get them to change, as Curtis was saying. And you can benchmark all those costs against yourself and others. You can look at renegotiating your lease on ASC space, equipment, vendor agreements, all of them. Like he said, renegotiate third-party agreements. They're going to come in and do that. So be it if you guys do it, some of this can be done 6 months ahead of time. Some of what I'm about to tell you can be done 3 months ahead of time, but some of it takes, you need to start doing it a year ahead of time, if you will. But even third-party agreements, I know some people say, well, I got a year left on this thing. Do it anyway, because sometimes you can leverage and say, okay, we'll sign an extension on this agreement if you give me a 25% bump, whatever it is. But new cases are the lifeblood of a successful ASC. So you can ask each partner and physician that is doing cases in your center if there's any cases that they could bring to the center that they're currently taking elsewhere. Get those. I get that you can't do it the weekend before that you sell and expect to get that value increase, but you can do it in a timely fashion before and get credit for it. And it depends on the buyer. But if we get into like recruiting new physicians and syndicate, well, I've seen where it just has to be seasoned. Some buyers, so I'm just talking about a financial sense in the buyer's requirements, none of the other laws or anything, 3 or 4 months. So if we go recruit new physicians, we lock them in, so they're investors, they have non-competes now, and they're bringing cases, and they've been bringing them for 3 or 4 months. They give you credit on that, and that's what I was referring to. You might have to bring somebody in like Curtis to do a forward projection and a discount cash flow, and to be able to prove all that up and make those arguments and tell your story. Also, currently, we're looking at a competitor to merge with. If you have 2 centers that treat patients in the same market, think about merging those and combining the revenue and significantly reducing the overhead. With the right staff or consultants, if you will, you should be able to carry out most of, if not all, of what we just talked about, because doing this will help you tell your unique story, or at least getting a handle on what you can do will help you tell your unique story in a much better way, and it also make your argument for higher valuation and higher sales price, because the buyers are going to do those things once they invest. So I would do as much as I can beforehand so you can capture a multiple on that instead of a percentage of that.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. Blayne, I'm going to have you start our discussion as we keep moving along. What is stage 1 and stage 2 due diligence?
Due diligence. The phrase due diligence is actually a misnomer. It was originally used in connection with public underwriting. The Principal Liability section of the Securities Act establishes a defense for securities lawsuits for misleading perspective for certain persons like underwriters if they exercise due diligence in investigating the company before selling the securities. But the term now is much more broadly used to mean the investigation that an investor or buyer would undertake or undertakes of a prospective seller. And the due diligence process is extremely important as it affects the buyer's decision whether to invest or acquire the company, what terms and for what price. And a lot of sellers believe that due diligence is something that they do towards the end of this sales process, and I would tell you that that's not true. And I would even tell you that people teach that hey, due diligence is done towards the very end of the process, and I say to the very end, meaning maybe the third quarter, if we use the football terminology of 4 quarters. I'll tell you that you guys need to do your due diligence and prepare that before you get started and in this stage. But this due diligence allows you to get a very deep and wide understanding of your business, because you must be able to present your business in the most favorable light, as we've been stressing over and over. One of the goals for the prepare to sell stage is to present your surgery center where it looks as appealing as possible to all potential buyers. Additionally, we've discussed the speed of the process, the efficiency of the process, and the overall buyer perception. They're the three big components of what you want to manage. Well, here's how we get a handle on that. Being organized and proactive versus reactive helps us with those three things, helps us make those three things happen. It also allows you to get in front of any potential weakness that you might have or see. It allows you to craft the message around the options that you see that could be strengthened. So, and we'll speak about that more about that later. But stage 1 and stage 2 are essentially the paperwork stages, or what we call the paperwork stages, and can be exchanged remotely and easily. We use a virtual data room with folders and give different level of accesses to different potential buyers. Some of the buyers will argue that doing due diligence is a costly process for them, and they make that argument, in my mind, in my belief, because they want some sort of no-shop or stand-still agreement in place which says, hey, you can't talk to anyone. We're dating. We're exclusive. And it's not real in my experience, and I'm totally against standstill agreements in most situations without a breakup fee, but we can talk about breakup fees at another topic for another day. But proactively providing the paperwork will help rebut the notion that this process is expensive and time-consuming, because we're going to do it up front. And again, we stated there's 2 stages here, but sometimes depending on the size and the scope of the business that we're selling or that you're selling, the and depending on the buyers, we'll actually sometimes combine stage 1 and 2, but with them broken out, you can wait to give more information as you get more comfortable with knowing the potential buyers and knowing that they're real buyers and not just tire kickers or trying to get some of your information. But in stage 1, and I'll rapidly go through some of this, and if people want more information on that, they can contact us, and I don't have a problem giving them the list. Physician information, the CV with date of birth. Then number 2, corporate entity structure, list of shareholders, percent of ownership, and type of securities, description of corporate parent and subsidiary owner structures. Then you want the financial statements. You got to give all that up, and we typically get that for 3 full years and whatever the year-to-date is. So it's 3.5 to 4 years, and we also want that monthly P&L for the last 3 years. Monthly production, CPT, billing reports for 3.5 to 4 years. Description of case referrals and breakdown of the last 12 to 24 months, depends on what type of business and size and scope and whatnot. But fixed assets, I mean, we want a description of each piece, including manufacturer, model, serial number, when it was put in date, book value, description of maintenance contracts, etc. Personnel head count, list of employees indicating positions, salaries, hours worked, etc. Real assets and lease terms. So we want all that from your real estate to your equipment to any of the obligations that you guys have, and then all of your general corporate material, schedule of all shareholders, percentage like we talked about, any agreements related to voting securities, all the legal entities, all the organizational documents, the PPM, subscription agreements, or corporations. We want it all. Again, the financial information, but we want the budgets, forecasts, any analysis that third-party people have done within the last 3 years, valuation, management consultants, accountants, any audits, any reviewed financial statements, fixed assets, ledgers with cost, life, appreciation, book value. Again, like I said, all the operating data, monthly patient volume, by data, volume data by modality or CPT code or procedure for a couple years, patient referrals by zip code, referring physicians, competition, market sales. If you've done any market analysis, any marketing plans, any descriptive literature, that helps with educating the market. It helps with looking at what's out there, and it speeds up the process. Physician relationships, all contracts that you have with physicians, employed, consulting, compensation, any supervisory agreements, including medical director, any interpretation agreements between the company, any other physician organization or hospitals, then all of your contracts that you have, contracts with hospitals, other providers, rates, commercial space, ground lease, option agreements, credits, credit and term loan agreements, employment contracts, union contracts, management agreements, medical director agreements, billing agreements, service and maintenance contracts, $5,000, all the staffing, all the medical equipment, all the insurance coverage, all the real property. I'm running through this pretty quick just to save on time. Any of the regulatory and lease licensures that you guys have in place, you want all that stuff put up front, all of the accreditation that you have, good standing certificates, CON, licensures letter, radioactive, letters of non-renewability, anything legal in compliance, any threatened litigation. Please understand that you want to provide all of it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you see it as a weakness. You want to get in front of it, like we said, and be able to explain it out, because it will be found whenever the buyers come do all their searches, all their lien searches, all their legal searches, and whenever they come on site multiple times. You go through this process, joint venture, partnerships, minority interests, etc. So you want to get all of the information associated with your business. You want to organize it in folders, and you want to present that up front. So you speed up the process. You create trust that, hey, I'm not hiding anything. Hey, we're in this together. Ask me a question, I'll answer it directly. All of those types of things up front, and then any of the hiccups, any of the uncomfortable things, you want to be able to tell the story about it.
Thank you, Blayne. Curtis, anything to add?
That was a very great answer. Nothing really to add on kind of the whole process. Just something interesting that I've come up against recently between Phase 1 and Phase 2 is there's been a strong push by lawyers to deal with any antitrust issues in the Phase 1 valuation before you really get to that letter of intent or before the deal looking like it's going to close, and concern with letting a potential buyer know your managed care rates or what you pay your employees within the market for fear of potential collusion between the parties and affecting those contracts in the future and your negotiating abilities.
Thank you, Curtis. We've reached the top of the hour. Still got a few great questions I want to get to for the roundtable. Leave a few minutes for Q&A, so let's just keep moving. Curtis, can have you start a discussion on how would you suggest an ASC determine its competitive differentiators and market opportunity?
Sure, Rob. Obviously, the first part you got to do is go out and look at what centers are in the market, and understand how you compete against those different centers. The competitive differentiators generally are, do you have capacity? What is the age of your equipment? How much block time? How many ORs and minor procedure rooms do you have to offer different physicians? And like I said probably in the last slide I had it up, a lot of it comes down to those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Understanding what your strengths are and your opportunities, if you have that strong case mix, if you have your partners already engaged, and you have the young, aggressive partners, if you have a developed center, you've got policies and procedures in place, you've got block scheduling of your ORs and doctors using your ORs, and you know when your availability is and how you can grow it, and what are the opportunities out there to get the additional doctors involved. Do you have the equipment to handle the different specialties if you're in a CON state? Do you have a CON that allows you to perform the different types of procedures out there? Who are you competing for in the market? Is there a number of ophthalmology centers out there and you're looking to add ophthalmology? Well, it's probably going to be difficult because at the end of the day, you might not have the equipment, you might not have the block time, you might not have the specialization in billing in that area. So you need to understand, what you do have and how you can use that and what's on the market and how that compares and how you can monopolize and use the services you already offer.
Thank you. Blayne, anything to add?
Yeah, just real quickly, because I know we're knocking on time here. A couple of things when you're looking at this in the capacity to prepare to sell your center. Some of the buyers out there would look at a organization that has something special or different that they might be able to roll out to other centers within their system, if you will. Just for a general example, I know an ortho group that has ortho ER attached and some other things attached to their ortho surgery center. So essentially, they have a medical mini mall, if you will, so there's multiple things and it's all tied together. Well, a larger group that really values that concept will have an increased motivation to purchase that center. Same thing with, say you have a center that has a great direct-to-patient marketing program that is very successful with the staff in place, with all the procedures in place, all the intellectual knowledge in place. That would be valuable or more valuable to the buyer that wants to start that program. Pain centers that do that have labs, someone that is a larger pain group that wants to add labs would have a better interest in, or a higher interest in paying, and might pay a premium over someone else. So those are the types of things that you need to look at in preparing your surgery center for sale.
Thank you. Curtis, I'm going to build on what we've already touched on a bit, but can you just start a discussion? How would an ASC determine its weaknesses?
Well, I think as far as weaknesses are concerned, you got to, I think probably one of the best things to do is bring in a consultant, because at the end of the day, you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. So if you're, if you're weak in an area, you may think you're doing okay, but ultimately it may not be running as smoothly as it possibly could. So to get someone in from the outside to take a third-party look at your center, I think is pretty good step. But short of doing that, there's a number of benchmark studies out there. The Ambulatory Surgery Center Association puts out benchmark studies. There's other benchmark studies on compensation and operations and stuff like that. And I think a good way to start is just go around benchmarking yourself versus the market. Obviously, a lot of those studies are based on surveys, and the surveys are only good as the respondents that respond to them. So, it's difficult because you don't know who's responding. And if you get a lot of poor centers that respond, you may look awesome, even though you may be falling short in certain areas. Anything else, Blayne?
I mean, just in general terms, the reason that you would want to go and look at that and find that out is once you understand your weaknesses, you can look to see if you can do anything now to shore those up to increase the value of your surgery center in the eyes of the buyers. So think value drivers, all those things that we talked about. But in the event that you cannot or do not want to invest, you want to be able to craft the message to help the buyers understand the weaknesses and what can be done about it, if anything, Additionally, you want to make sure that the buyer partner that you end up with is able to help with those weaknesses. However, they can mitigate them, or they have more experience in those areas, whatever. But those are the purposes, if you will, behind that.
Excellent. Blayne, let's stick with you. Let's have you start a discussion on what you see as typical deal killers and how you think an ASC should address them early on.
A few things. I'll rattle them off. Time kills deals. We've, deal fatigue. We talk about it often in my world, and we discussed how to address this by being very prepared in going into this process. Not knowing what you want can kill the deal. So you need to, again, go through this entire process. So a lot of things that I'm mentioning is mitigated by going through the process that we have already spoke about. So not knowing what you want can kill deals because it leads to not being able to make a decision, because you're like, man, is that good or is that bad? Do I really want that? And you're having to think about it later on in the process when you really should have thought about it in the beginning of the process, which I've seen a lot of people not do. But having unrealistic expectation kills the deals. Arguing over position rather than trying to work to get the deal done kills deals. Not having your physician partners bought in early on, not having open communication between the buyers and the sellers kills the trust factors, which kills deals. Not disclosing potential snags early on or trying to hide issues, those will kill deals later in the process because the buyers will find out. The problems during the due diligence process will come out, then the seed of doubt creeps in, and there you go. That's a real, it's not a real good way to start off a partnership, if you will. Sometimes this happens, reneging on commitments, meaning come to agreement on deal terms and wanting to change them later. That kills deals because it's like, man, is that how that person's always going to be? I'm talking on the position side, I'm talking about as well. But less often these things happen on the buyer side. They do happen, but less often because they just have more experience and they're more prepared and whatnot.
Sorry, Curtis, anything to add before we move on to our final question for the roundtable?
Not much. I mean, the biggest thing I find that kills deals are just unrealistic expectations of the seller. And that's something I think someone like myself or someone like Blayne kind of brings to the table to advise the seller of what should be realistic expectations in the front end, and make sure all the partners, Blayne talked about communication, and I talked a lot about communication between all the partners, making sure, understanding what expectations are of the partners, and making sure that the deal that's worked out meets those expectations, or if it's not going to meet those expectations, why it's not going to meet those expectations early on, because it only takes, a few people to kind of crush a deal, if they don't want to do it. So, it's important to set those expectations and make sure they're not unrealistic at the beginning.
Thank you, Curtis. Final question, Blayne, can I have you start the discussion? It's advice I'm sure that many ASCs are looking for. How would you suggest an ASC handle underperforming physicians?
That's always interesting and touchy topic, and not one that's fun to address very often. But underperforming physicians are a problem in most centers. Surgery centers once upon a time had 20 to 30 partners. But only a few were truly committed to the surgery center to use it exclusively for their cases. Times have changed, and the committed few physicians are increasingly getting upset with the underperforming physicians. And additionally, the underperforming physicians reduce the value of the surgery center in the eyes of the buyers. Even though we're discussing this in the context of preparing your surgery center for sale, we believe that you need to constantly be reevaluating the ownership structure of your facility to reflect its current users. This will help keep the incentive incentives for the owners that are properly aligned to maximize the ASC value and in turn put your center in best light for an acquisitions. But fairness in group persuasion might be the best and easiest way to convince partners to sell some or all your shares. I'm going through this exact issue with one of the surgery centers I'm working with. This person's not meeting the 1/3 test. Kind of has a, beyond that, has a less than favorable attitude about the surgery center and whatnot. And so the first approach is going to just approach them and see if they want to sell to some of the other partners. So that's what I would suggest in that situation early on, or the first step would be to have someone or a group of someone approach the offending physician and ask them to sell their shares. There's a few ways to redeem those shares. An existing physician or physician can purchase. The ASC can purchase the shares from the selling physician. But typically what that ASC does is hold them in, I don't know if you want to call it treasury or whatnot, so they'd hold treasury shares, but the surgery center would own them until the new physician investor is identified, and the distributions would be calculated without those shares. But a new physician investor can purchase the shares directly from the selling physicians. Most surgery center documents have agreements in them where all partners must fulfill the 1/3 test, which most of us are familiar with, but in short it means that a physician owner, 1/3 of his or her income derived from performing outpatient surgeries must be performed at the center or in the center in which he has an ownership stake. It's the ASC safe harbor. If the physicians are not adhering to that, the typical agreements allow for removal for noncompliance by some method that's defined in your agreements. Additionally, many ASC documents have the no-cause termination or the defaulting partnership provision within them, enabling a vote, be it by the board or supermajority of the owners, 65, 80%, whatever it is within your documents, to remove an owner for any reason or no reason or because of a defaulting event. If your operating agreement doesn't contain any of these, you're looking at this in the preparing to sell context, you should be able to squeeze them out by paying them fair market value for their shares and not allowing them to be part of the new company that you would create with the buyers or the new buyers and the investors so you'd do that with the new buyers and the docs that are committed to the surgery center. So essentially you'd buy their shares, squeeze them out, meaning that they would not be allowed to be in the new surgery center company, if you will. And with anything like this, it's just very general information, and you need to be working with your lawyers and executing this. You need to be adhering to the documents that everybody signed.
Excellent. Curtis, anything to add?
Yeah, that was a great answer. Just a couple of probably add-ons to what Blayne said. With the 1/3 test, most centers have the physicians sign off that they're doing 1/3 of their cases at the center. So you're kind of under that requirement to prove that they're not doing 1/3, before you kick them out under the safe harbor for the anti-kickback rule, which is generally always been a challenge. So an alternate method, which Blayne mentioned, is kind of a squeeze-out merger, and I've seen that done both ways. I haven't seen it done often. Obviously, you got to consider all the politics involved with it. But as Blayne mentioned, what you do is you set up a separate company, a separate LLC, and that LLC comes in and buys the surgery center, so it buys everybody out. So you had 12 partners before, 2 are underperforming, the 10 that are not get together, create an LLC, they're majority shareholders, they offer to buy out the other, the surgery center from the other LLC, they've got the majority stake, so they vote to approve it with or without the other 2 minority interest shareholders, and then the new LLC owns the surgery center and the other 2 doctors are gone. And like I said, you could do that with just the doctors that are currently there and get them out before the sale, or you can create it with the new company and the management company and do it after. It's probably a little more expensive the former way because you're you're going through a couple of transactions and doing legal work and financial work and everything else for two transactions, even though they kind of feed into each other. So all something to consider in dealing with underperforming positions prior to a sale.
Terrific. Thank you, Curtis, and certainly thank you, Blayne, for addressing as many questions as you did during the roundtable. I want to go just a few minutes longer, tackle a couple of attendee questions. If we don't get to your question, you have an additional question, I certainly encourage you to contact Blayne and Curtis directly. You have their contact information here on the final slide. We'll get into a couple last questions. I'll ask Blayne and Curtis for some final thoughts, and then we will conclude. First question, Blayne, I'm going to ask you to start the discussion. So this participant says they hear a lot about putting together a deal book. What is a deal book and how important is it?
A deal book, in the way I would define it, is all of this. So you're essentially your story written out in a marketing context, meaning so you would take all this due diligence, you would do your market and competitive analysis and put that on paper. And so think of a annual report, if you will, but with a sales spin on it. And we'll talk more about that whenever we get to marketing your surgery center. So you put that together in a book and give that to the people that you believe are really serious in looking at your surgery center and the acquisition of your surgery center. So it's this kind of prettied up annual plan with a sales spin or a marketing spin, if you will, that you use to go out there and market your surgery center, obviously after we've qualified them and after they've signed non-disclosures, et cetera, but that's what it is.
Thank you. Curtis, anything to add? Yeah, real quick, the deal book I think is greatly important. It allows you to go out to multiple parties quickly. You can tell your story to multiple people. You don't have to call each one, have meetings with each one. You sit out there. It also allows your communication to be consistent on your story. You're not telling different people different stuff. You have everything together in one place, and everyone kind of gets all the same information, can make decisions, and come back with questions that you can share with all potential buyers. So, it's probably one of the most important parts. It gets the ball rolling on the purchase of or sale of an ASC.
Thank you, Curtis. I'm going to stick with you to tackle our second question for the Q&A. When should participants, when should an ASC get evaluation in the sale process?
Well, it's a complicated question, and it sounds kind of easy, but it's pretty complicated because everyone has different rules. A lot of times it comes down to a lawyer's opinion on if they're comfortable or not on the purchase, because sometimes a lot of deals get done without evaluation. The management company is pretty comfortable. They operate in the space. They're pretty comfortable. They know what fair market value is. The sellers are comfortable with the offer that was put on the table, and they've gone through a negotiation process, and there may be absolutely no valuation done, and that's commonly fine. If the sellers want to get comfortable with what their center's worth, I've seen sellers do it at the very early phase. Sometimes it helps manage some of the expectations of the physicians, and you can kind of put it back on the valuation expert and say, well, this is what they feel is fair market value. We talk in multiples of EBITDA, and we say, okay, everyone expects a 9 or 10 times multiple of EBITDA, but the market's in the 5 to 7 range or 8 range. And so, you may want that valuation done early, even more of a limited scope valuation, just so the doctors know what they can be expecting through the process. That might create some issues later on if the seller comes in at a higher amount. From a legal perspective, the attorney may say, well, we have this valuation, and now we have some regulatory concerns that they may be paid above fair market value. So a lot of our clients on the management side will get if they need the valuation to paper their documents, they'll get it done, later in the transaction. So, they may work with some firms, they use them a lot, they know where they're coming out, and they may use the valuation as a negotiating tool and say, hey, this is all I can pay. Or they may make an offer and wing it and hope that it's supported by an evaluation later on. At the same time, those firms may know what valuations would come out at or what they'd expect them to come out at, so even though they're making an offer, you know, a lot of times evaluations are likely to support that offer just because of the management company's experience with the industry. So short question, long answer. I mean, it really kind of just depends on the comfort level of all the parties and how you want to use it, what you want to use the valuation for.
Thank you. Blayne, do you have anything to add?
Just real quickly, I mean, we've spoke about this multiple times, but well, from our perspective, our job at the end of the day is to capture the highest price and the best terms at the end of the day, if you really boil it down. And what we're going to do is go out there and create an auction approach, competition, negotiate amongst multiple buyers, drive the price up as high as possible. And most of the time, the seller would not need, in our opinion, a FMV, a fair market valuation. It would be the buyers that might need it, and they would do that after we've already negotiated and driven the price up, because we would force them to take that into consideration, meaning our process, unless we did some complicated activities, you know, shortly before the sale, 3 to 6 months before the sale, because we might need that third-party valuation to justify the future cash flows, because we're relying upon future cash flows significantly less than we are relying upon the historical cash flow, which is the EBITDA. Then we might suggest that we have a valuation at that point in time, but that's only to prop up or justify the price that we're out there getting, and to maybe overcome their arguments on the other side.
Thank you. I'm going to ask both of you to provide some final quick thoughts, and then we will conclude. I'm going to start with you, Curtis.
Okay, thanks, Rob. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that needs to be considered when selling an ASC. Recasting financials, looking at your strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, getting everything kind of together in that marketing book in a manner that'll tell your story in the best possible way, so that you can really maximize the value of the center. And I think a lot of the stuff we talked about today is really helpful in allowing a seller to go down that route, and you know, as they need help in that process, you know, Blayne and I are always there to help.
Blayne?
Yeah, I just appreciate everybody staying with us. I apologize that we've ran significantly over and was long-winded, but there's a lot of detail in this, and it comes down to the details in being able to put your surgery center in the best light going forward. So while I apologize for taking that time, it was much needed, because again, it's the details that are going to help you capture your goal, because let's face it, the goal of most physician owners is to maximize price and terms, and to be able to do that, we have to be able to go out there and explain the positives of our surgery center, and to be able to overcome the weaknesses. And we need to understand those so we can make sure that we end up with the right partner that is going to help us take our surgery center to the next level. So you guys feel free to reach out to us if any of this stuff that we went through too rapidly. Just reach out to us and we'll get it to you.
Thank you, Blayne, and again, certainly I want to thank both of you again for taking as much time as you did to address so many questions in the roundtable, a few in the Q&A. Just to reiterate what Blayne said, if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Blayne and Curtis, and I hope you will join us for part 3 in this series, which we noted earlier is on effectively marketing your ASC. Mark your calendar for Friday, November 16th, starting at noon Central. receive emails about that. And if you haven't received any emails about that or want information, I encourage you to contact me or Blayne. Again, contact information here on this final slide. And of course, I want to thank all of the attendees for taking their time to join us and sticking with us a little bit longer today. This concludes today's program. Again, I hope everyone will join us next month. Look for information on that program over the coming weeks. And I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.